My first monologue is from Rossetti's Women by Joan Greening, which focuses on introducing the character of Fanny Cornworth, who is one of Rossetti's muses. My second monologue is from Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. It's when Mark Antony is speaking at Julius Caesar's funeral. My lyric poem is The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe, which explores themes of love and loss. And my passage of published prose is from the BFG by Roald Dahl, exploring themes of communication. Did you see her? Lizzie Siddle was her name, and she was always like that, posy. I hated her, just because she could write poetry and paint. Came from a respectable home. Don't mean nothing when you're dead. Killed herself over him. Caused quite a stir at the time. Well, you can imagine. He was really famous by then, and so was she, and in her way and in our sort of circles. All sorts of rumours were spread by those who didn't know, but they all agreed that he was probably with another woman and at it the moment she died. I didn't say that though. Oh no, I kept quiet about it. Fanny, he said, don't say a word, and I didn't. Did what I was told. He was in a bad way though. He felt guilty. People said it's because he loved her so much. It wasn't, because he loved me. I think he felt guilty. Well, he taught her to paint and things, but he always said he loved me. I believed him. She believed him. He could make you believe anything. He was always good to me though, apart from the other women. Never minded about my past. Dante, Gabriel, Angel. I would have done anything for him. Come to think of it, I did. Little one, he would say, darling heart. And I knew he loved me more than anyone else. I dared down to my feet in those days. The colour of corn, he said. Corny, I said, because I've heard it all before. Ran away from home when I was young. Oh yeah, I wasn't born a whore. I was a blacksmith's daughter. Lived in a village in Sussex. Bored stiff I was, and forward for my age, so I came to London. Thought I would find something wonderful. All I found was a lot of dirty old men. It was the workhouse or the streets, no choice really. It wasn't respectable to go into the workhouse. Did all right for myself though. Had my regulars and everything. Then one night I was in the gardens watching the fireworks when he approached me. Said he wanted to paint me. Well, I looked at him kind of odd, because I'd done everything else, but I'd never been painted. And he said he was an artist. Well, there was me, thinking he was debauched. I looked at him again, and I saw that he was beautiful. Now, don't tell me a man can't be beautiful, because he was. And I just stared at him. Mark Antony from Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The evil that men do lives after them. The good is oft interred with their bones. So let it be with Caesar. The noble Brutus hath told you that Caesar was ambitious. If it was so, it was a grievous fault, and grievously hath Caesar answered it. Here, under leave of Brutus and the rest, for Brutus is an honourable man, so are they all honourable men. Come I to speak in Caesar's funeral. He was my friend, faithful and just to me. But Brutus says he was ambitious, and Brutus is an honourable man. He hath brought many captives home to Rome, whose ransoms did the general coffers fill. Did this in Caesar seem ambitious? When that the poor have cried, Caesar hath wept. Ambition should be made of sterner stuff. Yet Brutus says he was ambitious, and Brutus is an honourable man. You all did see that on the Lupercal I thrice presented him her kingly crown, which he did thrice refuse. Was this ambition? Yet Brutus says he was ambitious, and sure, Brutus is an honourable man. I speak not to disprove what Brutus spoke, but here I am to speak what I do know. You all did love him once, not without cause. What cause withholds you now to mourn for him? O judgment, thou art fled to brutish beasts, and men have lost their reason. Bear with me. My heart is in the coffin there with Caesar, and I must pause till it come back to me. But yesterday, the word of Caesar might have stood against the world. Now lies he there, and none so poor to do him reverence. O masters, if I were disposed to stir your hearts and minds to mutiny and rage, I would do Brutus wrong, and Cassius wrong, who you know are honourable men. I will not do them wrong. I rather choose to wrong the dead, to wrong myself, to wrong you, than to wrong such honourable men. But here is a parchment with the seal of Caesar. 'Tis his will. I found it in his closet. Let the commons hear his testament, which, pardon me, I do not mean to read. And they would kiss dear Caesar's wounds and dip their napkins in his sacred blood, yea, beg a hair for memory of him. And, dying, mention it in their wills, bequeathing it as a rich legacy unto their issue. The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. Once upon a midnight dreary, whilst I pondered, weak and weary, over a many quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as if someone gently rapping on my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, rapping on my bedroom door. Only this, and nothing more. Back into the chamber burning, all my soul within me burning. So and again there came a tapping, somewhat louder than before. "Surely," I said, "surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see then what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore." 'Tis the wind, and nothing more. Open here I flung the shutter, and with many a flit and flutter, in there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not with least obeisance made him, not a minute stopped or stayed him, but with mine of lord and lady perched upon my chamber door, perched upon the bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more. Then methought the air grew denser, perfumed by some unknown censer, swung by seraphim whose footfall tinkled on the tufted ground. "Wretch," I cried, "thy God hath lent me, by the angels he hath sent me, respite, respite, and nepenthe from the memory of Lenore. Quaff, oh quaff, that kind nepenthe, and forget the lost Lenore." Quoth the Raven, "Nevermore." "Prophet," said I, "thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, by the heaven that bends above us, by the gods we both adore, tell my soul within the haven, within the distant Aidenn, it shall clasp a sainted maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Clasp the rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels named Lenore." Quoth the Raven, "Nevermore." "Be the word our sign imparting, bird or fiend," I shrieked up starting, "get thee back into the tempest and the night's plutonium shore. Leave no black plume as a token of thy lie thy word has spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken, quit the bust above the door, take thy beak from out thy heart, and take thy form from off the door." Quoth the Raven, "Nevermore." And the Raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid dust of Pallas, just above my chamber door, and his eyes have all the seeming of a demon that is dreaming, and the lamplight over him streaming, thrown his shadow on the floor, and my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. Snarlscumbers. "But if you don't eat people like all the others," Sophie said, "then what do you live on?" That is a squelching tricky problem round here, the BFG answered. In this slush-funking giant country, happy eats like pineapples and pigwinkles is simply not growing. Nothing is growing except one extremely icky poo vegetable. It is called the snozcumber. The snozcumber, cried Sophie. There's no such thing. The BFG looked at Sophie and smiled, showing about 20 of his white teeth. Yesterday, he said, we was not believing in giants, was we? Today, we is not believing in snozcumbers. Just because we happen not to have actually seen something with our own two little winkles, we think it is not existing. What about, for instance, the great squizzly scat chopper? I beg your pardon, Sophie said. And the humplecrimp. What's that, Sophie said. And the rat rascal. The what, Sophie said. And the crumpscuttle. Are they animals, Sophie asked. They is common animals, said the BFG contemptuously. I is not a very noble giant myself, but it seems to me that you is an absolutely know-nothing human being. Your brain is full of rotten wool. You mean cotton wool, Sophie said. What I mean and what I say is two different things, the BFG announced rather grandly. I will now show you the snozcumber. The BFG flung open a massive cupboard and took out the weirdest looking thing Sophie had ever seen. It was about half as long again as an ordinary man, but was much thicker. It was as thick around its girth as a perambulator. It was black with white stripes along the length, and it was covered all over with coarse knobbles. Here is the repulsant snozcumber, cried the BFG, waving it around. I squoggle it, I misplace it, I dispunge it. But because I is refusing to gobble up human beings like the other giants, I must spend my life guzzling up the icky poo snozcumbers instead. If I don't, it will be nothing but skin and groans. You mean skin and bones, Sophie said. I know it is bones, the BFG said, but please understand that I cannot be helping if I sometimes say things a little squiggly. I is trying my best all the time. The big friendly giant looked suddenly so forlorn that Sophie got quite upset. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't mean to be rude. There never was any schools to teach me talking in giant country, the BFG said sadly. But couldn't your mother have taught you? Sophie asked. My mother, cried the BFG. Giants don't have mothers. Surely you're as knowing that. So this is my personal reflection. How did you build your performance? Well, my starting point was with the character of Fanny Cornforth in Rosetta's Women, with the themes of love and her dislike of her rival, Lizzie Suddle. It's a rich character and really a nice one to get your teeth stuck into. The research I did into Rossetti and Fanny was interesting because I came across some pictures that Rossetti had drawn of Fanny, and that really brought her to life. And also found some information about what the family of Rossetti thought of Lizzie, and they said she had no charm of breeding or intellect, which really shows that she was from a completely different class from Rossetti, and I really wanted to try and bring that out with the accent and the way she behaved. Next for variety, I looked to find something from Shakespeare because we'd just finished doing a seminar on Shakespeare, and I was interested to try and incorporate something. I'd just been to see Julius Caesar by a production by the Company of Wolves, and it had only 5 actors in it, and the main characters of Caesar, Brutus and Mark Antony were all played by women, and this inspired me to take on a role in Shakespeare that was actually a male part. I don't think I would have done it if I hadn't seen that production and seen how great it was. And because Mark Antony is a very respectable, upstanding member of the community, a politician in general, I thought it would make a lovely contrast to the Fanny character. For the poem, I wanted to find something with a dark theme, and The Raven seemed the obvious thing to do. It's a very famous poem, and it's been parodied a lot, even by The Simpsons have parodied it. But it was a great one to try and get my teeth into. It's got themes of love and loss, but what I really liked about it was the contradiction in it. So obviously the writer loves Lenore and really loved Lenore, but he says but it's almost like he's heartbroken and he wants to remember her, but he doesn't want to remember her. So this is a real conflict there with the Raven, talking to him and being psychologically inside his head and making him turn quite mad. Finally, I wanted something humorous, so I looked to Roald Dahl. He can always come up with something really funny when it comes to prose. Firstly, I picked The Witches, but then I thought the undertones of it are quite sinister, and so to give more variety I looked at other works, and I really love the Snoscumber because it's got so many words that really are made up words to try and get your teeth into and around. So that was great fun to do. So once I'd chosen the pieces, I started to learn them, and then once I'd learned them I started to get into character and build the characters. So talk about 1 or 2 items of the programme that were challenging. Well, it was challenging to build the characters. Fanny Cornforth is, she's obviously very hard. She has lived on the street, she's lived on her own and looked after herself, but she's obviously in love with Rossetti, so there's a real soft side to her as well. So I wanted to try and bring out both of those things. And the skills I used to do that, I wanted to use Chekhov. So I came up with a psychological gesture. I wanted her to take his love. So it was a gesture, taking his love. And then I looked at her character and what she would be like. So I felt that she was a doer, and then she feels and thinks, because, she went to London and she didn't actually know what she was going to do when she went to London. In terms of an object, I thought of her as a big round beach ball, kind of bouncing softly, and the element I had was earth. She's really grounded, she's very direct, uninhibited, definitely sexually uninhibited, so I thought that was a really good element to use for her. For Mark Antony, when I was creating his character, the skills I used and the interpretation I used, what I wanted to do was get into the physicality of a man, and that was what I tried to do first off, get my shoulders really back and the physicality and standing up, self-assured and confident, like a character, like a man would if he was making a speech to the hundreds and thousands of people. So that's where I started it. So what challenges did I discover? Well, I was concerned about taking on Shakespeare because I've never taken on Shakespeare before, never played any characters in Shakespeare, and so it was daunting, I have to say. I went through the text first of all, as we were shown in the seminar, and identified the iambic pentameter in the extract, and the rhythmic stresses of the da 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 da. It actually came really naturally, as it does in speech often. Then I searched to try and find the 10 syllables in each of the lines. And where I didn't find that, where I found it was irregular, I kind of looked to that to see if it was something that really needed to be emphasised. And actually I found that but Brutus says he was ambitious, and that's obviously a real important line where he's mocking Brutus. with the Raven was really challenging in terms of the rhythm, which I hadn't really expected. The trochaic octameter was much more complex than I really anticipated. The stress is completely opposite to Shakespeare, and the long sentences are 16-syllable sentences, which are often difficult to get your tongue around. There's a lot of alliteration, such as the pallid-busted palace, which I've got wrong many times. But what have been my strengths going forward? Well, my strengths have been, I think, the research. I've loved researching characters. I've loved researching the rhythms in the poetry and the Shakespeare. I've loved to research words that I didn't understand to help to bring the text to life. So things like palace, nepenthe, lupercal, finding out all of these things really made me understand the text a whole lot better. Limitations, well, I have to say that I found it really difficult to switch character, so go from being Fanny Cornforth one moment into Mark Antony the next moment. Really difficult thing to do, and learning so many lines, it's just very, very challenging at my age. How would I approach similar task again? Well, I give myself plenty of time to do it. I think time is the bit that's required in order to learn the text really, really well. I practice moving from one character to the next so that I knew how to do that much more effectively. And I'll also read the pieces out loud several times to make sure that I really felt like I could perform the piece. The Raven for sure was extremely challenging in terms, as I said, of its rhythm, its long 16-syllable sentences, alliteration, etc. So I'd want to have really looked at the passage before I decided that I was actually going to take it on. So health and safety, what did I do in terms of health and safety? Well, I made sure that I set up the equipment safely. I made sure that there were no trip hazards where I was working. Make sure I knew the area that I had in order to work with, so that I could be in the camera the whole time. I had a spot on the wall behind so that I knew where I was looking, rather than looking straight into the lens. Before I performed, I did some exercises. So I've been doing some physical exercises to warm up. So warming up the body, making sure my arms and legs were nice and loose and free and relaxed. My neck was nice and loose and free and relaxed, and giving a real kind of shakedown of my body. But also the instrument, the larynx, wanted to make sure that muscle had also been exercised, so it was free to move. Doing lip trills and also doing tongue trills to try and get the vocal cords moving. Doing a little bit of massaging of the jaw, and definitely the breathing, because the breathing is extremely important. So deep breathing, using the diaphragm, deep belly breathing, bringing it in and out, putting my hand on my belly whilst doing it to make sure I'm breathing properly. In terms of sustaining my energy throughout, well, I've been very conscious to keep hydrated and make sure that I'm being well slept before doing this. But also I wanted to keep hydrated all the way throughout this. I've got my water there next to me. When this has been getting very stressful, having to do many takes, I've been going out and going for a walk and completely clearing my head, so getting out into the nature. I've got a forest. I go for a walk in and it completely blows all the cobwebs away, and then I can come back and start afresh. So those are some of the ways I've been looking after myself prior to the performance.